one of the main reasons to visit is I want to see a dingo, and
Absolutely, I want to see a dingo.
I hope that we can see dingoes, and
Yeah.
I hope that they're not going to be eradicated as so many other animals worldwide have been as of late, because they seem to inconvenience man. So without further ado, I would like all of our jungle junkies worldwide to give a warm welcome to Simon and Jennifer. Are you both here? One of you here? Any of you here?
Yes, hello, g'day.
Hey, how are you? Yay, welcome to Urban Jungles.
Thank you, nice to talk to you.
This is how we got the dingoes going. Hi to you too, Mr. Dingo.
G'day, Andy. G'day, Danny.
Hey,
guys.
Simon, how are you? That's
Can
pretty
you hear us
cool.
okay?
Yeah, I can hear you great, and that
Absolutely.
was, I assume, an actual dingo.
Yes, well, that's all due to the credit of Jen. She recorded one of these dingoes on Fraser Island, so that's a real dingo.
Wow. Nice. Thank you, Jen. Well, amazing. I mean, your story is just completely fascinating. Geez, I don't even know where to begin on this one. Simon, Jen, why don't you guys just give us a little bit of a breakdown of your individual experiences with dingoes and why you work with them or have chosen to work with them in life?
Ladies first.
Okay. Well, I'm a wildlife photographer and artist and author, and I've been on Fraser Island for 7 years now photographing the dingoes, and basically just fell in love with them. They're such a beautiful animal. So, but during the course of my observations over there, I started to notice that the animals were really suffering. So I started to write articles and things and brought a bit of attention to the situation. But unfortunately, that brought a lot of attention onto me. The government here didn't like the fact that I was criticising their management of the dingoes. And to cut a very long story short, I ended up being raided, and all 7 years of my work was confiscated from my home. Stolen, yes. I had 6 officers in my house, and they raided my house for 6 hours, and it's just a 2-bedroom unit. So they took every piece of computer equipment that I had. I had 19 external hard drives and a computer and all the memory sticks and anything to do with dingoes, photos that were on the wall and so forth. So they basically removed the entirety of my 7 years' work on the island. And subsequently,
Go ahead,
subsequently I was charged with interfering with the dingoes and taken to court.
Now, I was going to say, you've been to Fraser Island enough times that I'm assuming the authorities there were familiar with you and what you were doing?
Yes, I had a legitimate permit to be doing what I was doing on the island. And, yeah, to start with, I had a fairly good relationship with the rangers on the island. But, again, once I started to criticise what was going on there, the relationship crumbled and it became one of animosity.
Amazing. And, I mean, while you were there, you weren't just, for the most part, sitting back idly. From what I understand, Colin, of course, can't speak more highly enough of you. He's explained to me that you've probably personally cleaned up those beaches for, enough years to have collected literally tons and tons of waste material, as far as helping out the ecosystem there.
Oh, that's right. Because I was going to the island every day, I just couldn't drive past the rubbish. So I ended up collecting it, and I used to bring a ute load home every day. So I think I was removing about 52 tonnes of rubbish a year from the beaches there. Yeah, there's just some sort of current that goes through, and all the marine debris washes up on the beaches at Fraser Island. And, we have cyclones and weather events that take the sand and put it over the top of all the rubbish, and then it degrades and disintegrates, and then when the sand washes away again, you've got these really tiny pieces of plastic, which of course wash out to sea and affect all the marine animals.
Right.
So, yeah, that's right. So, and I think in some ways they resented the fact that I was doing that as well, because it probably would have been a job that they should have been doing.
Oh, good Lord. Well, thank you for that. I mean, personally as a wildlife warrior, definitely appreciate everybody's individual contributions. And, I mean, I'm sure you're probably literally responsible for saving the lives of, at least a couple dozen sea turtles or, manatees in the area. So good on you, Jen. I mean, what ultimately is causing this basic downturn in the condition of the Fraser Island dingoes that you began to observe?
Sorry.
I was just going to say that, from what you observed, was it something over time? I mean, were they naturally a gaunt population, or was it just something that you saw progress over time that got worse?
Okay, yes. So, look, they are a naturally lean animal, and at certain times of the year, especially when they're looking after new puppies, they do lose a lot of condition, but there is a big difference between lean and emaciated. And I started to notice that when certain management practices were in place, that the starvation process was amplified. So what's happening on Fraser Island is a very strict management process whereby the dingoes are supposed to understand that they're not allowed on the beaches at certain times of the day, so that if they do appear on the beach, they get hazed, which is where they're shot with a clay marble from a slingshot. And there's also another form of aversive sort of conditioning, they call it, which is where they are fitted with collars, and if they go into the wrong place or, display behaviours that are unacceptable, that they're given an electric shock. So there's sort of other things like when pups are very young, they're ear tagged for identification, and I noticed that once the ear tags went on, that the pups started to have trouble hunting, and so then the starvation, really kicked in. So, look, while they are a lean animal, there's things going on over there that really are exacerbating the fact that the poor little things are starving and being overmanaged. Trying to keep dingoes away from people is unrealistic, and it's actually cruel because dingoes have had 4,000 years of symbiotic relationship and domestic training with people, starting with the Aboriginal people. They were never truly a wild dog on Fraser Island, and trying to force them into the bush to hunt is really quite cruel. And, of course, a great deal of their food comes from the beach. So, they might be carrion on the beach, dugong, turtles, dolphins, whatever. They can fish. They can catch shorebirds and so on. And the beach is their territorial boundary. So trying to keep them away from the beach is really something that's not very productive as well.
Why are they trying to impose these boundaries on them? Is it for tourist protection?
Yes, basically they just want to separate people from dingoes because of the possibility that a dingo might attack somebody. But what we're seeing is what's actually happening is that juvenile dingoes come out onto the beach and they're very boisterous and playful. And if you've seen the way dogs play with each other, they rush at each other, they charge, they nip, they bite, they jaw spar. It's all very boisterous and can even appear aggressive. So these juvenile animals come down onto the beach and they see people. They've never seen a person before. They don't know that we don't understand dingo play behaviour. So they go bowling up to somebody and, try to nip them or barrel them over or something. But the intent really isn't to attack them. The intent is purely just play.
Well, I think people also need to understand that, this is basically a dog that's kind of very close to domestication. As far as you said, 4,000 years of symbiotic relationships with people, we can't expect them to completely ignore people.
No, that's right. It's forcing something onto them that was never really part of them. Yes, as you say, they're semi-domesticated, and trying to force them to become wild animals is just not working.
Now, you spending so much time in the field with them over the course of so many years, I couldn't imagine, Jen, what it was like. I'm imagining you got to know some of these animals personally.
Yes, over 100.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow. So I named all, they were all individuals, like every dog. They all had their own personality, and my goal was to watch several packs and observe the progression of the pack, say from the first litter of the alpha female right through to perhaps her last litter. And I had been doing that successfully with the pack that I was recently observing and had watched that bitch for 4 years. So I was very attached to her and the alpha male, and of course each subsequent litter of puppies. But sadly, every pup from every litter basically died.
Good Lord.
It's just the most awful thing that I've ever had to watch in my life. Watching an animal starve to death is just beyond imagination. It's such a cruel process, and it literally broke my heart.
Well, especially if it's at the direct consequences of what we're imposing upon them, which is completely unnatural. I mean, how can you expect – see, this is just something that drives me crazy, and this is a worldwide phenomenon, is when people go into the wilderness, you have to take your chances. That's where wild animals live. I cannot stand these people that go to national parks and need protection from the wild animals. Give me a break, people. Grow a set. And, I mean, look at the unfortunate consequences that these animals are facing, which is something that's happening worldwide. You know, I want to say, I don't want to take away from the dingoes, obviously, but even here in the Northeast, we have a similar situation with our bears, you know, another iconic animal from North America. You know, you feed a bear or an alligator, another iconic American animal, you're basically sealing its death sentence, and it's absurd. There's no reason for that. I mean, there's no reason to have to take it to that extreme. You know, the adverse conditioning can work under certain situations if you're asking for something realistic. I mean, trying to teach animals to stay off a beach, that's absurd, especially when you're on an island. I mean, you're surrounded by beach, you know.
Yeah, they've got nowhere else to go anyway. The island's only 26 kilometres wide at its widest point, and on the mainland, a dingo's territory might be 200 kilometres. So on the island, they're trying to survive with territories that are only 20 kilometres. So they have to go out on the beach. They've got nowhere else to go. And it's been proven scientifically, too, that aversive conditioning doesn't work on dogs because dogs don't understand what the pain is for. It's just counterproductive. All it does is just actually it can cause animals to become aggressive.
Are the tourists that visit this island aware of what is going on at the expense of their time? I mean, don't get me wrong. I would probably be the first one on a boat to Fraser Island, if I had the opportunity. I'm not ragging on the tourists there or anything, but I mean, are they aware of what is happening because of their presence?
I just don't think they are. I really don't. Some may be educated, but really everybody wants to go there and have a good time. 1,000 backpackers go over every week, and their primary goal is to, do their quick 3-day tour, see everything they need to see. See a dingo is always number one priority on everybody's list, but they don't understand that the result of their actions could actually cause the demise of the dingoes. By them misbehaving and causing an incident to happen, a black mark gets put against that dingo's name, and 3 strikes and you're out, basically. So, no, I don't think they understand at all. And like you said, it's a wilderness area that they're entering, and they need to take responsibility. It's like parents going there and not supervising their children. I mean, the beach on Fraser Island is a gazetted highway. Now, you wouldn't leave your children unsupervised next to a highway anywhere, but that's what people are doing. They're letting the kids play down at the water's edge, and they're up at the campsite having a drink or whatever, and anything could happen to the children.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the chances of Andy. What was that number you read to me earlier today when we were talking about this show? Andy was doing some research on attacks. How many attacks were on Fraser Island?
Since like 1980, I guess they've been recording the attacks on humans only from dingoes. But there's only like 10.
Is that accurate, guys?
Look, possibly, but when you look at the statistics, Fraser Island is a really safe place. It's safer than your neighbourhood. So if you're looking at 500,000 people a year going there for the last 20 or 30 years, and we've only had 10 attacks, which could be called serious, that's pretty safe.
Absolutely. I'm sorry.
Andy, don't cut off our guest.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Go ahead, Andy. What were you going to say? Go ahead. You got our attention now.
No, I mean, it's just the percentage. I mean, what you're saying it accurately. The percentage of people who visit there and the amount of people who actually get attacked and hurt by a dingo are just so astronomically off balance. It's insane.
Listen, the reality is I could go down there to Times Square right now in New York City at, our 11 o'clock, our local time, I have a better chance of getting attacked by a pit bull roaming the street than you would going to Fraser Island and, basically, probably like with hanging pork chops off of your arms or something like that. But, otherwise, short of that, it's absurd. And that should reflect the actions that these people are taking upon. I cannot believe the government is doing this to such an iconic animal, and they're not shy about it. I've seen the newspaper clippings that some of them revolving around your case, Jen, showing the rangers shooting the dogs with really no abandon, and not even doing it correctly in some cases.
No, and you're right. They are promoting it. They're almost boasting about it. And it's this over-sensationalisation all the time, and it's actually almost justification, one could say, for getting rid of the dingoes on the island, if you know what I mean.
Right.
It'd be a lot easier to get rid of the dingoes as far as management goes. So the more sensationalised the reporting and the more incidents that are reported and the more that's made of all these things, the harder it is for the poor dingo to keep surviving.
So sensationalism is not just a United States thing. Interesting.
Oh, no way.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's really ridiculous here. I mean, there's been incidents that we've been able to prove either didn't happen or whatever. There was a girl that got her shorts ripped by a dingo, apparently. But eyewitnesses actually said that what happened was the dingo nuzzled her leg. It was just being affectionate. But later on she said, no, but if I say my shorts were ripped, I can sell them on eBay for $1,000. And there was another incident where a child was attacked. And when I say attacked, the children aren't mauled or anything. They're just bitten. And what had happened was two dingoes were mating, and they were in a copulatory tie, which they can't break. And the child was poking at them with a stick. So, and the parents were watching. So, of course, as soon as the dingo's untied, they turn around and bit him. I mean, you would too.
That is called natural selection. The little creep probably just doesn't deserve it. I hate to say it, but I mean, if your parents don't care and you're sitting out there teasing an animal with a stick, you're probably going to turn out to be a psycho mass murderer anyway. So the dingoes are doing society a favor as far as I'm concerned. But seriously, I mean, it's absurd that it's just there's so much persecution here, and there's really no foundation for it. And not only is there persecution, but the trauma and the impacts of the government's actions right now are ridiculous. On one side, you have dingoes that are dying or starving or being shot incorrectly and living for days with .22 caliber bullets in parts of their body. And then you have, here's a situation where, Jen, I mean, I think 99.9% of our listeners in your situation would have done nothing differently. You cannot sit there and call yourself a nature lover and allow an injustice for an animal like that to starve to death in front of you. I mean, I know as a biologist, as a zoologist, I know that there are certain laws, there are certain lines that you cannot cross, but I mean, you have to be a human sometimes, or at least you have to be an inhabitant of this planet and act accordingly. I mean, feeding an animal does not warrant the type of, I can only imagine, trauma that you're going through, because, I mean, what kind of an impact has this had upon your life?
Oh, it has been devastating, and it's ruined the last at least 2 or 3 years of my life. And you're right, it's not the right thing to do to feed an animal, but I just couldn't bear it any longer, I didn't feed them for 6.5 years. I put up with it, I did the right thing and just simply observed and all the rest of it. But after I thought the next litter of puppies is going to die and we're running out of dingoes here, we're actually literally going to run out of dingoes on the island. And so, yeah, I did it. But I don't think it deserves a $40,000 fine and 3 years suspended jail sentence. I mean,
no, get that number, 40,000. Like, did they just pull that out of the thin air?
Look, the prosecution actually only asked for a $5,000 fine and no conviction, but the magistrate was involved in the Clinton Gage case. That's the young boy that was killed. So, look, he shouldn't really have presided over the case, but he clearly had a bias, and he had decided at the start what he was going to do to me, and he actually wanted a custodial sentence. And fortunately, I got out of that. But no, his penalty was 10 times greater than what the prosecution actually asked for.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
See, now, Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're right.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I just, it's beyond absurd, because even knowing that in the back of my head, knowing what you're going through, Jen, I still don't think I could watch animals starve. I really don't. Like, a wild animal, I don't think I could sit by and watch, especially if you've got, Jesus Christ, do you know, I mean, how many of you have had a dog for 6 or 7 years? Imagine watching an end to it like that. I mean, just imagine having the relationship, the luck. How many of you are lucky enough to see animals out in the wild? You know what a magical thing it is when you're not seeing it. Listen, I'm a zoologist. I've worked in zoos forever, and there's a huge contrast between animals living in a zoo and animals living in the wild. For those of you that are lucky enough to make the connection with an animal in the wild, there's no way you can just go out and piss on that connection by watching the animals suffer for something that they really can't help and shouldn't be. You know, it's just an injustice. All the way around, absurd.
Yeah, that's right. If you were to starve your dog on the mainland, the RSPCA would be all over you. Yeah. You know, you can't treat animals like that on the mainland. So I don't understand why, just because they're wild animals, that you can do whatever you like to them. Well, it doesn't seem right.
No, it's not right, and, you know, it's absurd, and I hope the government realizes that this is just something that is ridiculous and is now being looked upon by everybody around the world. These kinds of laws just have to stop. There's no reason whatsoever for you to have to deal with the fines and possible prison time that I'm sure rapists, drug dealers, and possibly even some murderers probably don't even have to deal with. I'm sure. I mean, it's really absurd, and just shame on you, Australia, for treating your animals that way and for treating your citizens that way as well. I mean, it's definitely something to consider. I was telling Colin a while ago, I actually am I'm familiar with Fraser Island. I love carnivorous plants, and there are some really beautiful sundews, and I have a sundew that originated from there, from a botanical collection, and it's just an amazing place. You know, I would love to go there, but now knowing this, I got to be honest with you, I don't know if I'd really be too keen on supporting anything that the government's doing there. You know, why am I going to pay for the 22s that are going to be put into a dog's skull?
Exactly. That's right. And, you know, if we could get your listeners to start writing letters to our government and letting them know that, let the Australian government know that because of what's happening on the island, you're not going to go there.
No, absolutely. What can we do, Jennifer? What can we do to best help you with this absurdity? I mean, I assume your battle is far from over still.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I've got the next 3 years that I have to get through, of course, and during the 3 years, it's not safe for me to go onto Fraser Island. I'm allowed to, but I'm not allowed to observe the dingoes over there anymore. And in fact, they've told me that if I'm seen anywhere near a dingo, that I'll get a $300 on-the-spot fine and possibly chucked in jail. I'm not even allowed to go bushwalking on Fraser Island just in case I come into contact with a dingo. If people could get on my website, fraserislandfootprints.com, and just check out, I've got a list there of people you can write to. That'd be really cool if we could start to get some letters coming into the government here from overseas. That'd really help.
Absolutely. Jungle Junkies, you heard it here. Please listen. Do Jen a favor. Yeah. This is beyond absurd. I mean, there's no reason anyone should be subject to this, especially not an animal lover, especially not someone whose best intention were for the wildlife itself. I will definitely post up the link on our website leading to Jen's for information. I will post up the link on our Facebook. I know Colin is all over it. He's been posting your site up on our chat room, and I'm sure it'll be up on my Facebook page when we get done here tonight.
Right there.
Please, everybody, please look into this. Just take a couple of minutes to drop the government a note and let them know that this is crazy. Let them know that they lost the Beastmaster. Let them know I will not be going to the island. That's it, Andy. I'll bet you off.
No, we're not going to the island.
I mean, Jeff, realistically, how long do you think that the dingoes have on the island if they go the way that they're going unmanaged?
Look, I reckon that we've only got around 10 packs left. And dingo packs aren't like wolf packs. Dingo packs are really just family groups, so they comprise an alpha male and female and pups from previous years' litters. So what we're seeing is that a pack generally comprises 3 animals because usually it's a 90% mortality rate for pups, sometimes a bit higher. So, yes, 10 packs with 3 members each and so many pups, and we've had 2 alpha males killed this year So that's 2 less breeding pairs that we're going to have. So, look, I just can't see that the dingo population will survive for much longer than a couple of years because, we start to get into genetic problems. And in the end, it might even be a case where they're going to have to be destroyed if we don't start managing that side of things as well. Like, I think, the Aboriginal people used to cross to the mainland fairly regularly and bring dingoes back and forth, so they were keeping the gene pool nice and clean. But now it's just too tight because they're running out of options of breeding with each other, if you know what I mean. So, it's really not looking very good for the survival of the dingoes over there. I think we're at desperate times now, and if we don't change something really soon, then, and you know what, if we lose the dingoes on Fraser Island, the whole ecosystem's going to collapse, isn't it? Because they're the trophic regulator.
They've been there for millennia now. I mean, you can't expect to take away an apex predator and not have, something go completely haywire, especially in an insular population. Where it's just basically this little kind of science experiment. Oh God, Jen, I mean, I really feel for you, and I mean, God bless you. You're a saint. You totally have done the right thing. I'm so sorry that you're facing these ridiculous penalties. I promise you, we will try to do everything we possibly can to alert the government to how ridiculous this is, and the fact that they are treating the dingoes, such an important, iconic animal, with so much disrespect. I mean, those pictures really, really bothered me when you're sitting there, putting pictures up on front pages of a ranger with a rifle muzzle up to a dog's cowering head. I mean, that reminds me of those prisoner of war pictures you used to see from World War I. They're just completely barbaric. It's absurd. I mean, Simon, real quick, I mean, thank you for being so quiet back there, my man. I find exactly. I find the story obviously fascinating. I mean, it's just, I can't even begin to tell you. I mean, what's your perspective on this? You obviously are a dingo fan. Why don't you let us know a little bit about, your work with dingoes and what you do?
Oh, just quickly, I've been involved with dingoes for 16 years, down in Victoria, now up here in Queensland. A few years ago, through Australia Zoo, they approached a fellow who had a dingo education centre, which had to be closed down, and he approached me to see if I could take ownership of his dingo. So we had to apply to the government, went through a heap of red tape and inspections, and took 12 months to be approved. That then made me the first private dingo sanctuary in Queensland. I'm the only one in Queensland who's allowed to breed dingoes for captive purposes only. I can't sell them to my mates. That's against the law. It's illegal in Queensland to own a dingo as a pet, yet over the border, people can have them like a companion dog. But so in a good position there. I was introduced to Jen about 3 years ago by a fellow, Professor Alan Wilton, who is a scientist that DNAs the dingoes for different sanctuaries in Australia. Any animal that's been captured in the wild, you DNA that for purity. And he introduced me to Jen. So we met about, I think it was 3 years ago, and then I had never heard of dingoes on Fraser Island, but have now obviously become passionately involved. But the bit that really bothers me, which Jen hasn't mentioned yet, is, Bob and Colin have said to you about our government here, how it lacks credibility regarding environmental issues. And at the moment we have this situation where whether it be Anna Bligh, Kate Jones, or even some of the rangers on the island, as I see it, they're supposed to be the custodians and guardians of all animals and on the island, but we've got a certain set of rangers there that seem to be have an attitude where they want to destroy as many as they can. And the bit that bothers me is that for their so-called research, they're the ones that are interfering with the dingoes. Now, Jen was charged not only with block defeating but also interfering with dingoes. Because I was in her company a couple of years ago, I was also charged and had to go to court a few weeks back for interfering and allegedly feeding. A lot of it's all just made-up stuff. But the bit that bothers me is that these rangers are protected under their own act. It's called the RAM Act, the Recreational Area Management Act. And these rangers are protected under that act to do anything to the dingoes. And as Jen mentioned before, with the air tagging, well, prior to that, they have to trap the dingoes, and they use these lures like leg traps. And once the dingo puts its foot in that trap, it goes into a massive panic mode, and no one just understands what's going through the dingo's head. at that time, it just messes it up mentally, psychologically, physically, the whole lot. And then these rangers jump on the dingo, and then they grab around the head and they fit these ear tags on there. Now, you've got to remember, these ear tags are the size of cattle tags we have on our cattle over here, and it punches a big hole in their ear. You can poke a biro through it. It's about, I'll say quarter of an inch, because you girls American, we'd say about 2 or 4 centimetres. And this is really painful. So you can imagine a pup. Now, the government said they don't ear tag anything under 6 months. It's a load of baloney. They even grabbed some pups December, just gone, 4 months old. They grab these pups, ear tag them. It puts them in a lot of pain, and as Jen mentioned, when they fit the ear tag, it damages the ear, so the ear falls forward. And if you look on Jen's website, you'll see some photos there where the ears have collapsed over the front, and the dingo needs its ears to hunt. And so with the rangers attacking or interfering with these dingoes, they can't hunt, and then they start to starve, and this is what Jen was seeing. And when she mentioned in an internet magazine her observations of these dingoes starving, because of that, the government took it personally, and they decided to attack her and virtually crucify her in the biggest way that they could. And the other thing Jen didn't mention too, that when they raided Jen's place and stole all her research, you've got to imagine she's got 6 to 7 years of 6 to 7 days a week research. No government, university or anything like that could afford the amount of money to do that type of research. Now, the government stole all that in this raid. They've copied the whole lot. Even though Jen got it back a couple of weeks ago, they have copied everything that she's got. They are now using some of her stuff on their own internet pages.
Oh,
so
my God.
There's breach of copyright. They're using her photos, and underneath they've got photo derm or whatever it is. So they've stolen her research. They are now using it. Now, the likes of, say, David Attenborough, even Steve when he was alive, also we've got another famous person over here, Malcolm Douglas, you may have heard of.
Mm-hmm.
He has got a couple of croc farms over in Western Australia. He just died recently. None of these guys have got the information that Jen has got. She's the only one in the world that has intimate information on the Fraser Island dingo. Now, see, the government stole all that, so they've probably received millions of dollars worth of research by raiding her house. And what Jen also didn't mention, this raid, it was personal. A couple of rangers on the island knew her. It was a personal attack on her. Also, her ex-boyfriend, he was the one that instigated this whole thing. He was telling a few lies. He fed the dingoes, I think it was 30 times more than Jen. He went over to the island on his own. He bought all the meat. He did everything. He cops a $2,500 fine. Jen's $40,000. He get no conviction, let off scot-free because he was a whistleblower. And Americans know what whistleblowers are like, don't they?
Oh,
Good
yeah.
Lord. It's the foundation of our country.
So, here's their... Sorry?
It's just it's the foundation of our country. Go ahead, sorry.
But, yeah, so it's all pretty sad. But the other thing is the government or the rangers over there have this ear tag register. Now, we've had access to it. Jen's got access to it through the Freedom of Information thing. We noticed their ear tag register. What it is every dingo that they capture, they're supposed to record the colour of the ear tag. It's a, tricolour? It's a laminated disc with 3 colours on it. Well, they're all fading now. Within 3 months, you can't even read them. They even put staples in them to hold them together. It's a very archaic way of doing it. And the only reason they're e-tagging these dingoes is that because if a tourist says, oh, look, this dingo came too close to me, they say, what colour was the tag? And they will go out and they will kill it within 2 days. Now, the other thing is, you sort of mentioned before about the tourists on the island. There's about 100 full-time residents that live there. None of them have been attacked by a dingo. And you get a lot of tourists that visit regularly.
Mm-hmm.
They know how to behave around the dingo. But yet, there's some people that, as Jen said before, they come on the island and they really have no idea that they're entering a wilderness area. And they walk around the beach as if like they own it. The children are not really tended to. And the rangers, even just over this previous Easter we've just had a couple of weeks ago, a group of us met with the government and Bob Irwin, had a private meeting with them, and the dingo group, Save Fraser Island Dingo Association, suggested to DERM about having extra rangers on the island over this Easter period because it's one of the busiest periods over the year for tourists invading the island. So they'd said, could you have more rangers on the island, and just to let people know just to be careful. And even Jen suggested, how about having more rangers at the entry point? Now, to get on the island, you need to get there via a barge. It's like a big ferry, fit cars and people on there, drives onto the beach, and you can just drive onto the sand. Yeah, four-wheel drive only. Now, some places there, they were having 500 vehicles a day arriving on the beach. You can enter from both sides. They had no rangers there. So you have these situations where people are just doing the wrong things, and it's generally these, I call them, 2-day tourists. They just come across for a couple of days, do what they like, and then they nick off and they leave a mess everywhere, like this rubbish that Jen said she picks up. There's probably some good photos on Jen's website. You just see there's just rubbish everywhere, and the government won't even bother picking up. It's disgusting, and it's just it goes on and on. But we have this mental mindset with these rangers to be wiping out the dingoes, and we feel at the moment, like the government says there's between 100 or 200 dingoes left on the island, but they cannot accurately specify that. We believe there's less than 100, and just recently one of the tour operators who visits the island every day taking tourists over, he believes about 30 dingoes have just gone missing. Now, we don't know whether they've been shot, captured or whatever, but they're suddenly not there anymore. And to have a viable population of dingoes on the island, you really need around 200. There used to be 400 on there, over 100 years ago when the Aborigines were living there, and no one got attacked then. And Jen has on her website, if any of your listeners can go on there, it's on YouTube. There's a second in there where Jen has filmed a chap, a bloke. He's just walked onto the beach. He's just in a pair of shorts, and these 5 dingo pups come running down the beach, and he's yelling out, "Oi, oi, oi, oi!" And Jen's just coming out onto the beach with her camera, and she's yelling out to this guy, just stand still. You hear this voice, "Stand still, mate, just stand still." And so he does, and Jen walks over there, and then within seconds, the dingoes stop jumping around because they're curious to see this fella, and then the dingoes just walk away. They're totally bored because the guy just stood there. And Jen has information out there for the people to see, but obviously the government won't recognise it because Jen's displaying the truth. Jen's all about education, well, the government's all about eradication. So that's what you got, and it's really difficult. And even Bob said at court last week when he's outside being interviewed, he said to the TV station there that this government are totally corrupt in the sense of the way they manage our environment, and whether it be the coal seam gas, the dugong sea turtles, kangaroos and our dingoes, they have no idea about managing it, and they're destroying more than that. So it's great that we've got people like Bob and Jen and Madman Colin, if he's out there somewhere, putting the word out, and I think it's great, Danny, you and Andy, that you're sort of showing an interest, even though we're on the other side of the world to you guys, but it's all about wildlife and conservation, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, Simon, every time I hear these stories, and this is what interests me, is it amazes me how similar we are. Even though we're literally a planet apart, we have so many of the same similar issues. Everything you were just talking about with Fraser Island, we could probably apply to Yellowstone National Park, or
Absolutely.
Basically any large park where you have megafauna still living, where you have wolves, bison, moose, things like that. People are just stupid. People are idiots, and unfortunately, our governments have taken to protecting these idiots for some reason, when we should just let them get trampled and then eradicate them from the gene pool. But unfortunately, that's not the situation. And the same thing happens on either side of the ocean. I mean, it's unfortunate. People are stupid. They do these things that the animals then have to pay for. And the animals almost always have to pay for it with their lives. There's never anything in between. I've seen this on multiple different levels. I mean, working in wildlife rehabilitation here in our state, I've seen it with the bears. I've seen people who they go and they choose to live in bear country in a part of the state. I mean, the bears only occur in a very small corner of our state. Well, not small corner, but a corner of our state. And if you choose to live in this area, you have to realize that you're living in bear country, and you have to live accordingly. You have to seal up your garbage cans at night. You have to close your doors, lock your windows, because this is the animal's domain. And this is the same thing we're seeing here. I mean, the Fraser Island, they were there first. People, they've been there 4,000 years, 5,000 years now. you should be basically doing everything around them, not the tourists. And this is an international problem. This happens everywhere, and it's increasingly happening, especially now that ecotourism is becoming such a popular, thing. So that's why I do it, Simon, because it's not an Australian problem. It's not an American problem. It's everybody's problem, and it's going to get worse. And we need to pull our heads out of our asses and realize that we shouldn't be putting good people in jail or fining them. Jen should not be stopped in any way, shape, or form from conducting her work, because she's done a hell of a lot more out there than anybody else has done, and she's shown it. And now they came and took it all away, and it's just absolutely not fair. So, I mean, as long as we can do something about it, we're going to, because this is just absurd. It cannot go on. It just can't. It's impossible.
Thank you. Well said. That's very encouraging.
Well, thank you, Jen. Thank you so much for coming out and speaking to us. I know this has got to be an incredibly difficult thing. I couldn't even imagine having your life turned upside down for doing something that is basically just a human action. And the fact that it's being taken to such an extreme just leaves me shaking my head and, wondering what the hell, maybe this planet is coming to an end soon. I don't know. Something's going on. But either way, I'm sorry. I don't want to keep rambling. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Simon, thank you for joining us and for, talking to me over the week. I really appreciate it. I hope to hear from you again.
No worries,
we got to definitely do something else. Everybody, make sure you hit us up. Find the information on our pages. Let's do something about this right away, immediately, because it just can't go on. It's completely unacceptable, and it's absurd. So anyway, on that note,
thank you. It's all about education.
It is, and we need to educate everybody, because people aren't going to protect what they don't know about, and we got to get the word out to everybody. Our audience is primarily one that started off, as reptile enthusiasts, but if you look in our chat room now, you see that people are really upset about this, and it's not just somebody who loves reptiles. It's a nationwide wildlife crisis that we're in, and we need to act on all different levels. So I don't know.
Now, another thing, you said you probably wouldn't come to Fraser Island. Well, don't say that. You should come. You should visit. It's a wonderful place. I'm sure there's a young female here who could give you a guided tour over the place. I've got some very safe and friendly dingoes out here at my sanctuary, and they'll just lick you to death. So there's no reason for you not to come to Australia.
I say if you promise me that I can roll around with a dingo and let him completely lick me up, then I'm there.
Well, I've got one here called Honey, and she really is. When Jen first came to my place a couple of years ago, Honey was the first dingo that she met here, and they had this rather romantic relationship. It was quite physical, plenty of kissing, tonguing, the whole lot. It's absolutely disgusting. But anyway, this is what dingoes do. If they like you and greet you, they give you this tongue kiss, and you should feel privileged. They don't do it to everyone, but if you give off good vibes, and I think that's why some people now realise, some people call Jen the dingo whisperer, and I know that she has this very special connection. I don't know what you call it, ESP or whatever it is, but there is this connection that Jen has with dingoes. Now, just before we go, I just want to fill this in. I have a dingo here called Dixie who was interfered with by some, I won't mention their name, but some scientists, researchers a few years ago, where they fit this collar which gives that electric shock. They did other things too. Well, she is now terrified of men. I cannot get near her, but when Jen came here, Jen just went up to the enclosure. Dixie came right up, sniffed Jen. Jen patted her through the gate, and then Jen walked inside, and Jen can pat her. And now no one else can do this. Dixie had some pups last year, 2 little pups, and Jen's sister and husband, the children, came over here, and Dixie allowed these people to handle her pups. And the pups were, how old were they? 3 weeks or something?
Yeah, they were really little.
Yeah. And so here's Dixie allowing all this, but she is scared of men because of this particular male PhD candidate researcher, bludger, hurt her. Part of his research, he caused her a lot of pain. Now, dingoes remember everything. They're very gentle animals, and they're not these wild things that our government would like to portray. And so, if you get over here, I'm sure Colin and Bob will give you big man hugs and all the rest of it. And
I only want the tongue from the dingoes.
Well, get all your listeners to donate. Danny, get your listeners to set up a Danny Aussie fund, and they can pay your airfare to come over. You can do it for $500 now. It's pretty cheap.
Hey.
And you're most welcome. Come on down under.
I plan on it. Thank you, sir, very, very much. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, Danny. Hooroo, mate. Hooroo, Andy.
Take care, Simon.
See you guys.